Welcome, everybody, to another Oceanside Chat. As I just said before I started the recording, this will be closing out our quarter, and we're super happy to have Jenna Bryant with us. She is a tech recruiter turned VC. She's invested and helped build some of the most notable early stage startups in the country from the ground up. She's currently the co-founder and CEO and general partner of Embedded Ventures, a next generation venture capital firm investing in early stage deep tech startups. Alongside Jordan Noon, who's co-founder of Relativity Space. If you don't know what Relativity Space is, I encourage you to Google it. They launched in 2020, the venture, and they are taking commercial first approach to investing in startups with applications that can serve the DoD and the United States Space Force, just to name a couple. The firm invests in pre-seed, seed, and Series A rounds for companies focused in space operations, in digital engineering, and in advanced manufacturing. Jen is also the co-founder of Zoo, a portfolio company that develops advanced tools for hardware design. Kind of in a nutshell, Jenna is an expert in venture capital with a specialty in aerospace, defense, and manufacturing. We couldn't be more happy to have you on this call with us, Jenna. I'm super thrilled to have you close out this series for us for this quarter. I'll let you take it away and start your presentation.
Thank you, Arcelia, and thank you, Dave, as well for making this happen. I'm really excited to be here. Jordan, my co-founder, is definitely the famous one. I always joke that I'm just over here riding his coattails, but I do think that this talk is really relevant to the genesis of mine and Jordan's partnership. It shows the power of your network and really intentionally connecting with the right people and expanding your network intentionally. And that starts right now, or it has already started for a lot of you. And really in deep tech, especially for someone like me, who's not an engineer, my network has been everything. And so to be completely transparent with you, it's been the people who have created Embedded, who have gotten me everything I've achieved in my career has been genuinely a result of the community that I've surrounded myself with. And that community has taken a lot of work. In fact, it's taken over a decade to create. So I'm going to share with you really some kind of anecdotes about my journey, how I've kind of gotten to this point, and the people who have helped me along the way. I'm also very much an open book. My career started in recruiting, so I have never been afraid to reach out to the people that I don't know and needed to know. And I'm going to share with you exactly how I've done that and kind of give you a peek behind the curtain with some of that, and encourage all of you to take as many of those same steps as possible, because it's kind of unbelievable who you can get in contact with and kind of what the result can be. The result for me is that now I manage a venture firm with my co-founder, Jordan, who I met through cold outreach on LinkedIn. And I actually have a screenshot of it to share with you. So proof that cold outreach works and can result in some pretty incredible things. So with that, I'll do a screen share. My slides aren't revolutionary or too deep tech or anything, but just kind of help keep us on track here. And I'm totally open if y'all would prefer to ask questions as we go. I'm totally open to that. Or if you would rather wait till the end, my talking portion, I'll try to be succinct with, so that right around the 12:35 mark, we can open it up to a Q&A if we haven't started doing that already. So let me share screen here.
Yeah, we'll look shower and
the Buckmen are wilder than ever. Good old boys taking.
Is that you? Is that you? Okay, hold on. Let me find out who the culprit is. It's yeah, just a little fun reminder, everyone, to keep yourself on mute during a presentation in general.
We've all been there, okay? All right, so as you can see, this is Embedded. Let's see. Here's just a quick version of my bio. I feel like Arcelia covered it well and very succinctly in the opening. But prior to starting Embedded, I was a partner at a different venture firm focusing on deep tech, based here in Los Angeles. But prior to that, for a decade, I was actually a tech recruiter, which is, as you might not know, is a really non-standard transition in venture to go from a tech recruiter to a venture capitalist. But for me, it really was organic. And I do feel like all of the skills that I learned as a technical recruiter has served so well here. And I'll get into more of that as we keep talking. But some of the things that I had to do as a recruiter, and just so you have more context on that, I did work with some of the most notable engineering shops that are now unicorns. When they were baby companies in the pre-seed seed stage, I worked with Oculus actually while they were still on Kickstarter, working out of a garage in Orange County. And helping these startups find the engineers with the most in-demand skill sets. So I even worked with Tinder and helped place their first Android engineer. So at the time, those were really novel skill sets. But that did require stepping outside the box in order to kind of get my own clients and my own candidates. These were passive candidates, engineers who were perfectly happy in their jobs, had no interest in leaving and taking, potentially, especially back then, a pay cut to join a startup in exchange for a large stake of equity. So that required cold outreach at the time, and still today. I use LinkedIn for this. And now it has gotten slightly harder to get in touch with people over LinkedIn, but still not really. So it's like, I'll kind of take a multi-prong approach now, just in case someone doesn't check their LinkedIn as regularly, but people do more than you realize. But LinkedIn is still primarily what I use. And I did then. It's changed a bit with how I've done that, because now LinkedIn does have more features enabled that allow people to be spammed more easily. And so I do make sure that my notes are not like that at all. And there are certain things that I'll tell you about that can make sure that the person who receives your note knows that it's coming directly to you. But all that said, I was connecting with the most in-demand engineers in the world. And oftentimes when you're doing that, you're going to come across a lot of people who are also starting companies. So that's kind of how, even from a recruiter standpoint, I always work with really innovative companies that, again, many of which have become unicorns. And that was partially a result of me cold outreaching those companies right when I first, read a TechCrunch article about them or whatever. But a lot of it was actually with these super early stage companies. It was reaching out to engineers and strengthening my network of engineers, and just happening to stumble upon someone who was saying, actually, I'm not interested in that role because I'm starting a company. And then I go, oh, interesting. What company are you starting? And so that, when I transitioned into venture, it was, I actually was originally just contracting for the firm that I then became a partner at. They were looking for a technical co-founder to complement a non-technical founder. This was for a startup in the construction robotics space. This was several years ago. And in deep tech, it does typically require a very technical founder, or in a lot of times our portfolio, there are two founders. And so I was looking for that technical co-founder for them. As a result of that, I ended up meeting some of the most notable engineers in the space, several of which were starting companies. And so the venture firm that I was contracting for was able to see that and went, this is interesting. They started to see the trend of, I would meet someone who then is starting a company, and then they would see a few months later that other notable venture firms were investing in them, and it was being announced. And it's like, ooh, maybe she's onto something here, with, meeting all of these engineers, and many of which, turning around and starting companies, and then us kind of hearing about them in the trades. And so then that kind of resulted in me becoming a partner at the firm. I did know, I knew essentially what I needed to know at that point to be a partner in venture. I had worked for early stage venture-backed startups for a decade at that point, and working on their hard to fill engineering roles. I did for the first time see really under the hood in deep tech venture. And I really saw that, it is very different than late stage venture, where, it's a lot of time in someone's data room and deep financial diligence. In super early stage investing, it's, finding the right people who can execute on a technical hypothetical, really understanding a deeply technical market. And then, trusting those people to be able to execute on a timeline when the market's ready for it. And The common denominator in all of that, that is really unique and that I'm personally passionate about, is that a lot of those areas do require an engineer to figure out. So at my previous firm, part of why I really wanted to start my own firm was to make sure that I had an engineer as a co-founder, an engineer who was helping me de-risk technically, discover new investment areas, and all of that. And that was just something personally I was really passionate about. I knew that in order to make the best investments and to de-risk my investments as much as possible, I did need someone complementing me really well there. Now, the other really important thing that founders need right when they get a check is they need to hire people. So I definitely can pull my weight and then some when it comes to that area. And of course, with bringing in deal flow, it's just really on the technical evaluation where I really, really, really lean on my network. And that is a testament to knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know. And I know I'm not an engineer. I don't pretend to be, and I don't need to be. So in a nutshell, I'll just kind of get to the next slide, which now shows this is our current portfolio. And we invest across 3 verticals: digital engineering, advanced manufacturing, and space operations. Mostly super early stage. We've done a few opportunistic SPVs that are in somewhat later stage, one of which is Andrel, which is pretty well known. But everything else is pretty early stage. And one of these zoo, which I'll get into later, we actually incubated as a result of our network. But first, I want to dive into how cold outreach connected me to my co-founder, Jordan. I definitely took a blast from the past and pulled up my LinkedIn outreach to him. And I was really excited to read this because it showed a few things. It showed first that he didn't reply the first time, which I had completely forgotten about. And just so y'all know, this first note I sent as a LinkedIn connection request. You know, you can send a connection request and add a personal note. I sent this as that. That's why it's really short. Because I think the max character is like 250 or something like that. I always put the person's first name in a note when I'm sending it to them. For someone like Jordan, I originally wanted to meet him and he had obviously from day one with relativity had to figure that out. And for me, it's personal. My brother's a V-22 Osprey pilot in the Marine Corps. And so it's very important to me that the end user has access to really innovative technology. But I had no idea, you know, how do I teach my portfolio who's you know, invested in an area that might deploy commercially first? How can they be equipped to work with the government? And so Jordan, I really wanted to know Jordan. And I don't know if y'all know this, but Jordan is a USC graduate. He was a leader with USC's Rocket Propulsion Lab. He is very outspoken about his time at USC, and I'm definitely a huge USC fan because of it. And it's been really cool to see his experience, how his experience at USC resulted in his incredible career. He is also the co-founder and founding CTO of Relativity Space. I believe their most recent valuation was $4.2 billion. He built the world's largest 3D printer, and 3D printed a rocket. Is successfully launched out of Cape Canaveral last year. I was there. It was pretty cool. And then, of course, he's still, you know, is very involved and passionate about all things USC, and as a result, I am as well. But here's my cold outreach to him on LinkedIn. At the time, I was wanting him to join kind of just like a network of really interesting technical leaders in LA. And part of that was I was at a firm that did not have a technical person at the check writing table. And so I wanted to make sure that I had, you know, kind of all levels around me and people in aerospace and, you know, kind of the gamut there. And really stepping outside of the people that I already know. I also really, again, and on the DoD side, was seeking mentorship. And so that was kind of the genesis of this outreach. And then, as you can tell, he did not reply the first time, but that didn't matter because I was persistent. So if you can see on September 21st, I sent him a first note. He did accept my connection request. So that did happen after that very first note, which I always count as something. That's basically going, they're active on LinkedIn. They don't think I'm a weirdo. If they accept your connection request, then they're somewhat interested, but obviously, just like all of us, very busy. I don't always see a LinkedIn note I can't always reply the first time I see it. A lot of times I'll be in the middle of a meeting and I'll see it and accept and go, ooh, bookmark that, circle back, reply to that person, and I might not get to it for another week or two. But so I had originally reached out to him here, obviously wanting him to join my deep tech advisory network. He accepted my connection request again, which was a sign of something. And then in December 8th, I was lucky enough to host an event at an LA Kings game. And again, you do not have to have an LA Kings game event to get someone to reply to you, because clearly even then he couldn't attend. But it was just being persistent and making sure that I was on his radar, that if there was an opportunity for us to meet each other, that was able to happen. Also, it was very clear that like I knew who he was. I knew, he's right down the road from us, all of the things. It's clear that I know who he is. I'm very intentionally reaching out to him. I'm trying to find a way to, get in touch with him that's unique. This also works if there's like a specific question that you have for someone, or on the mentorship side, like I could have said, hey, I'm really trying to figure out how to work with the DoD because this is something that's personally passionate for me. And I'm sure he probably would have even replied faster. I was kind of slow rolling it in this situation. But then you see, he wrote back on December 8th and said, I'm going to DC on Tuesday, unfortunately. When will the next event be? Hoping our timing lines up one of these times. And I'm pretty sure that within a few weeks, the timing did work out. He ended up joining one of my CTO suppers, which was an event where I would bring several CTOs from whatever area together for dinner. But again, it doesn't have to be that. I have a million examples of cold outreach where I've just asked to hop on a Zoom, and that has worked perfectly fine. And to be fair, I probably would have gotten a response from Jordan sooner had it been something simple like a Zoom. Because obviously I'm asking him to like take time out of his schedule to join me at, a Kings game or whatever. But I think this is a really cool example of how like cut to, it was only a few months later, actually, probably, when I decided to start my own firm. He was someone who pretty quickly was able to give me really strong guidance on that. He was one of my first advisors when I first started Embedded, and then I lured him in as my recruiting ways taught me to becoming my co-founder. But I think this is a great example of kind of using your network, and the power of cold outreach, proof that it works and you can connect with people who then become your co-founders. Let's see. Another example of that is with the incubation of Zoo. I won't go too far into this just for the sake of time. Always happy to talk about it though. But in addition to the investments that we've made, which genuinely all came from our network, and a lot came from cold outreach. One of those was through me connecting Jordan with another person in my network, Jess, who also was an early embedded advisor. This was actually before Jordan became my co-founder, when he was just an advisor for embedded, when it was just me and I was trying to figure out who my co-founder was going to be, which became Jordan. But I connected them because Jess was dealing with a problem at her former company, a company she co-founded, Oxide Computer Company. They do next gen server racks. They're doing very well. While she was there though, she was, kind of dealing with hardware engineering for the first time, she's very notable in the software engineer. Her name's Jessie Frizzell. But she was early Docker, early GitHub. She, could figure out how to make anything automated and fast on the software side. She transitions to hardware and is like, I'm sorry, this is how people have been engineering hardware and designing hardware. This is archaic. Jordan and Jess, I connected them. They got on a call. They ranted for probably 3 hours on the woes of AutoCAD. Cut to, we created a GitHub call to action, and ended up then spinning a company out of the fund. Originally it was called KittyCAD, then we rebranded to Zoo. But it's basically advanced infrastructure for hardware design. But that is very much the strength of our network. And then in the early days of building Zoo, we have 19 employees now, but I'd say the first 10 were people that we were visible and available to. who kind of followed us, who had followed our journeys. We, again, were active on GitHub. We were active on LinkedIn, active on Twitter, in what we were building. And we really didn't take the stealth mode approach with Zoo. We very much let people know. And because between the three of us, we had a fair amount of people following what we were up to. A lot of our first employees and still now are people who we got to know just organically through our network. We didn't even really have to do too much digging to find them. Now, of course, with certain roles, of course, no matter what, you're gonna do some executive searching. And Vonnie, actually on our team, who was the head of talent at the Honest Company, she's worked for huge brands, Target, et cetera. And then also many early stage startups, literally doing very similarly to what I was doing before, is now someone I very much trust and love and lean on to help on the talent side, while we're also managing the fund, because I can't always do all of the talent things that I used to be able to do. But again, a lot of this is a testament to our networks. And of course, the origin story is very much the result of our network. And so I just kind of wanted to share a few things, building your dream team. And this could be talent, mentorship for, you know, anyone that you're trying to reach out to or to get to know. They don't have to live anywhere near you. They can live anywhere in the world. It's possible. You can get in touch with anyone. And I've done this for mentorship. I've done this for recruiting for talent. I've done this if I'm looking for someone to help me look into an opportunity, if it's a novel area that we don't know enough about, and we want to get to know someone we don't know to learn more about that area. Cold outreach. I always make a list. And for me, it's not a list until there's at least 10 people on it. So if there's a certain area that you're wanting to expand your network in, start making the list. This is literally all I put on that list to start. The goal, I use Jordan as our example, first and last name, and I always separate first and last. Just, you'll thank me later on this. If you end up using a CRM, it does always have to be broken out. So whenever I do a list, I always have it separated. But that's why it's not together. But it will save you for using the CRM. Their title, their company, location, LinkedIn URL, email. Y'all probably already know the tricks. If you don't, we can talk about that. Tricks to getting people's email addresses. They're almost always available. Status, normally I do a LinkedIn connection request first with a personal note, as you saw for the Jordan example. And again, them just accepting the connection request is a big indicator that they will reply to you eventually. I always put the first outreach date. Sometimes you can track multiple. I tend to do the first. And then notes, like based off just that screenshot, still trying to find a time, but engage with his last LinkedIn message. And you just go through and do the same process for each person. Normally, I'll also color code my list. So if someone accepts a connection request, I'll make the line, say it's Jordan, I'd make line 2 green or something like that to indicate that they've accepted whatever. And it just kind of helps you follow next steps. And then
Jenna, I have a question.
Go for it.
So based off of your experience and success in cold outreach, how much time do you dedicate on a weekly basis to cold outreach? And do you like divide it specifically throughout the week, or do you just like shove it all in one day? Like, how do you manage the time commitment for cold outreach? Because it's pretty labor intensive, especially if you're thinking about individuals as opposed to kind of like bulk mass communications.
Yes. Well, I'll say, I don't have to allocate as much time because, as you'll see, if you're not bulk messaging, you'll have a way higher response rate. So I have to reach out to way fewer people than anyone else. So if you're going to send a spam message and use like some automated whatever, you're not going to get any responses. So I normally always focus on quality over quantity. Again, I know I said a list normally becomes really a list when there's 10 people, but if for something really novel, if there are only 3 people who can do that thing, there are only 3 people on the list. But for me, something that we do regularly is we host dinners pretty regularly. We just hosted one actually last week in Austin. We rent a private dining room. I like to do events that are very small, 13 to 15 people max, especially when it's people that we don't already know. So that there can be a conversation where basically I'll give a prompt at the dinner and I'll say, introduce yourself, and say one thing that you're challenged with at the moment that someone else at the table might have an answer for. And that is a way for kind of everyone to get to know each other, because one person's talking at a time for a whole dinner, which is really awesome. But for those dinners, we invite, say we're going to allow 15 people, we'll maybe invite 18 to 20, because inevitably someone's not going to be able to join. But we try to have it be people that we don't know. So in addition to our team, it's people, say, in Austin that we've always wanted to meet in person, or have heard of but don't know, and we'll reach out to those people. So for that scenario, I kind of do it on a basis of, say, I'll really only allocate, I'll do one day a week to just maybe even an hour. Honestly, it doesn't take that much time, an hour out of the week on building the list, getting names from other people, crafting the outreach. Obviously that something like a dinner does also require, finding a space and all the other things. But really the outreach part can be pretty fast, especially if you keep your list small. Like say you start with just 10 people a week, and you say, I'm going to expand my network by 10 people a week. And I'm just going to focus on people that I've always wanted to know, that I really admire, or that are, in a really relevant role in whatever space. Or say you're starting a company and you want to make sure that you're expanding your network of blank engineers, then 10 people a week, that will maybe take you an hour a week, like if that. And you can find 10 people really fast. And now automating things like that, I don't always use it now, but there are Chrome extensions like GEM, it's GEM, where that help you kind of build lists on LinkedIn and things like that. So you can easily come across a name and add them to a list or whatever. So you can use things like that will help. Don't automate your outreach, because people will not reply to you. And I can always tell if it's like a bulk note. I can always tell that's because I'm like, there are a lot of things on my profile that indicate who I am, what I'm up to. And if I can tell that you didn't read my profile, I'm not going to reply. So then it's just about and again, I start with just a LinkedIn connect. That's a very short note. It can literally be as simple as, hey, Jenna, saw you on the VSG Oceanside Chat, would love to connect and be able to access you should I need to pick your brain on something in the future. Period. I would accept that, boom, like that. And that took 0 time. So keep in mind, especially the first note does not have to be, rocket science. So you don't have to allocate that much time. I probably over answered on that, but it really depends on the scenario. Now, if you're running a very tedious search for a rare type of engineer, you're probably going to spend, in phases. You're going to do a research phase on building your list and then narrowing the list down. You're going to really spend time crafting your outreach, especially for a second outreach. If you're going to send an email, you'll spend more time on that for sure. But you can really make some moves with very little time invested. And I always say, if you're just going to do start with 10 people a week, and you will see it work. Even if you don't fully know who you're needing to know, and you just want to be taking steps towards expanding your network, just start there and get a list of 10 people. And you can even read TechCrunch and go, find filters on startups that are in an area that are interesting to you, and ping the founders and say, hey, I'm really interested in blank space that you're in. Know you're the founder of blank, want to follow your career, whatever. And potentially have access to you if I need to. Those LinkedIn connection requests with a note are very easy and can be really short and sweet. And so that's pretty much it. But I really wanted to make sure to focus on, kind of the power of cold outreach, how it connected me with Jordan, which a lot of people don't know and don't realize, and then make sure that I can answer y'all's questions.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm not sure if there's any questions in the chat. I know there are no questions currently in the chat, but what I'm saying is in the group, if you guys have questions, you can use the hand raise function. I love it because it kind of queues you up and we can kind of go through those. Personally, I know I'll just start with questions as people kind of formulate their own. With early stage tech teams, part of the reason I asked that question about time management is because, they're basically managing every aspect of their business. And networking and outreach is one facet of a bajillion things that are weighing on them day in and day out. And I think
one of the most important things.
I agree. I totally agree.
Mhm.
But part of the reason that I asked that question is because it is kind of a routine question that comes up during Founder Circle is like, how do you do your outreach? Like, how much time are you dedicating? Like, what exactly are you using? Where are you finding your leads? Like, and everyone's trying to, I mean, if I'm being honest, I think like people are trying to hack the system a bit, right? Because they're trying to get time back on their calendar to focus on things like their product or fundraising, which is also networking. But what I'm saying is like, I feel like your message is don't do that. Stick to the basics, remain connected, be personal, personalize your responses, and you'll have better responses back.
Yeah, especially for founders, and one thing that we spend a lot of time with our founders on, because a lot, especially first-time founders, they don't even know how to, first of all, definitely don't know how to manage an external search firm. So some of their investors are saying, work with this firm. And, you know, sometimes those retainers can be hefty, and they don't even know how to kind of manage them. Luckily, between me and Bonnie on our team, we really coach them on how to do all of this. But say they're looking for, you know, a certain type of software engineer or a certain type of hardware engineer. First of all, you're going to get more responses if a note comes from a founder. Engineers really want to talk to founders, especially if it's a very, very early business, say pre-seed stage business. It's really hard to undo a bad hire, first of all, at that phase. So you definitely want the founder involved in that. But also you're going to get a greater response rate if the founder is doing the outreach. And a founder normally knows kind of where to look and what to look for. So, again, honestly, even if a founder is reaching out to 10 a week, but also has things on job boards or whatever, you will get a good result. But you can honestly, with very little time, if you dedicate 2 hours a week, you can reach out to a lot of people. And it just simply will work, because it does. And I've seen it happen over and over again. I saw that there were some hints.
There was. It's Galen. Galen
Awesome.
is one of the teams here at the garage. Hey, Galen, take it
Hey,
away.
Galen.
Oh, you know what? You're muted, Galen. You're going to have to unmute yourself if you want us to.
Thank you. Hello. Hello,
Hi,
RC.
Galen.
I'm waving at you, RC, from my desk. Hello, Jenna. Thanks. Sorry I was late. Double booked today. My question was about the tools. You mentioned Jim and LinkedIn. Do you suggest I use CRM, have for years, so I get the spreadsheet, you know, get the first and last name in there because it just makes it easier when you're importing. Are there any other tools that you would recommend that you may have mentioned or I may have missed? Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Let me think. I use Gem a lot, and I use that Chrome extension. And again, not sponsored. So this is just something that genuinely I have used. Let me pull up actually a list of ours. To see. Let me pull. I do have a list of some other things that I would pull up so that I'm just giving y'all everything I have. I've also used Rocket Reach to find emails. Not always.
Rocket Reach. Okay.
Yeah, not always. I always kind of like cross-reference Gem and, you know, kind of whatever. But I have definitely used that in the past. Let me see. I'm going to pull up just some other things. I'd say those are the two that I use the most, but I know there are more. So let's see.
And that's Gem, G-E-M?
It's G-E-M. Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then let me just find a few other things. Okay. Ooh, okay. I'm just pulling up a list that I have with various things. Yep, Gem. There are some other things. I know some people will use things like HireFlow. And I've not used those, but I know people will use things like HireFlow to look for people. Let's see.
Okay.
Back. I'm just going through some vendors lists.
Or if you think of something later, I don't want to be cognizant of
No,
everyone's
I'll send
time.
y'all
But
some.
the RC, you
I
can
know,
send it through RC. I'll get it.
I should have had this pulled up before this. But I'll say those are definitely Gem and Gym and Rocket Reach are the ones that I use the most for finding email addresses. And then honestly, a good old Google Sheet, it comes in handy always, because then, as you know, Galen, you can import it into any CRM. And a lot of times when you're starting a company, you don't know what you're going to be using. Are you going to use Greenhouse? Are you going to use Lever? And it's okay to also not select one yet, because the contracts are expensive and they're very hard to get out of. So do not select a CRM until you're ready to be locked in. And normally also you want to select your CRM with whoever's going to be your first recruiter. Because a lot of times they're like, well, I've only used Greenhouse and I am wanting to only use Greenhouse. So don't feel like you have to have something really robust immediately. You can really just use old school spreadsheets.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, we have another question from Brian. Hey, Brian.
Hey, Brian.
Hey, Jenna, very good to see you again. You're
too.
one of the judges from last year at the final pitch.
Yes, I
MEPC.
remember meeting you.
Hi. Yes. So right now we are trying to explore the space industry for in-space biomanufacturing of medicine, essentially. And when it comes to cold outreach, it's something that I'm not great at. I'm hoping to improve on. So thank you for the talk. I'm always concerned about trying to provide value in that very first conversation, because I'm concerned about whether I'd be able to get follow-on meetings with this individual. So that kind of makes me hesitant when I try to like reach out to people. Do you have any thoughts or suggestions on that? Because to me, it seems like it's a one-shot event. People's time are valuable. Is there any way that I could reconcile and improve on that aspect?
Brian, that's a great question. And so another thing that you want to always keep in your back pocket is, and when you go into any conversation with someone, is who do you know that might be valuable for them to know? And so almost every time I'm doing an intro call with someone who I've reached out to cold, I have an idea of some people they might want to know that I can then connect them with. So, and that does two things. It kind of returns the favor of them taking the time to talk to you, but also shows the strength of your network. So it just makes you seem, first of all, more valuable, they're more incentivized to stay connected with you. And I do that still all the time. So almost every time I connect with someone new, I'll say, if it's something like really unique, then I'll always have someone in my back pocket, but also sometimes I'll say, okay, who can I connect you with? Like, is there anyone that you've been trying to get in touch with that you can't? Are there any engineers in a certain area that you've been wanting to connect with? Just through USC alone, y'all have a lot of connections, and you have access to a lot of people. So even if it's an area that you don't have a ton of access to yet, you can say, hey, is there an area within USC that you're trying to get connected with? I'd love to help you there. You don't have to always know someone there, but so it's kind of always returning the favor. And on that intro call, make sure you say that. Even if the whole call is about what you have going on, make sure before it's over, you either offer to interest, hey, I see you're in, you do this in biotech, Are you, and you do the speaker circuit. Have you spoken at this conference before? Or have you gotten involved with this accelerator program? Even if you don't even know someone there, just like showing that you're willing to like do some research on them and kind of help them with whatever phase of their career they're in. And if they're in the phase of their career where they're on the speaker circuit, whatever, it can be that, hey, have you spoken at this thing? Like, this is something that I like attending and think you'd be a great speaker for. I would love to, ping the host of the event and ask them to have you. It can be anything, or it can be, hey, I know this person, they've been a mentor of mine, I'd be happy to connect you. Or have you worked with this division within USC? I'm happy to find the right people for you to connect with there. And that's normally the best way to kind of make sure that it's not a one-way road. And so they're incentivized to follow up and things like that. And then of course you have to take action on that. And so another piece of advice is write everything down. On calls, I take very thorough notes. I always have my action items. Don't feel like you have to do actions immediately, because that I know can be overwhelming. But if you write it down, as long as you get to it, and I'd say, give yourself a few days. For some things, it can't even take a few weeks. But as long as you do the follow-up or whatever you wrote down or whatever you promised them, you're good. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you very much, Jenna. Yeah, that was very helpful. Thank you.
Welcome, of course.
Awesome. We have another question from Aiden. You can unmute yourself. Go for it.
Hey, how's it going? So I'm
Hey.
wondering from a kind of early stage startup perspective, if you have any specific strategies for reaching out to investors. I know getting people to join the team is one thing, but um, I don't know. I think for me, it's still pretty scary trying to get talking to VCs or angel investors, and wondering if you have any specific strategies for cold outreach to those type of individuals.
That is such a tough question, partially because you're right, it's really tough to get in touch with investors, and that's a big reason why we've kind of built embedded the way that we did. We hate the like warm intro only of venture. I think it's, first of all, it just prevents people from knowing the best and brightest, but it also kind of creates this, you know, huge separation between founders and their investors. So I would say take the same, I mean, and we actually do this for investor to investor dollars. There are some solicitation rules, so we can't like cold outreach investors to invest in our fund. But we are always intentionally expanding our network of other investors, and as a founder, you can reach out in whatever way that you want. So I would say, honestly, a lot of the same methods that I talked about before. Cold outreach is always the way to go. Especially, I mean, definitely do inbound on whatever portal they have, but they get so much inbound. So I'd say if you submit your information inbound, also follow it up with a LinkedIn connection request. And for a venture firm, I would try to find, normally it might even be like an associate at the firm who is the person who's going to do some of the beginning or first calls with founders that do submit inbound on their portal. So in addition to definitely connecting with a partner at the firm, if you want, you know, like there's never any harm in doing that. But also if a firm is large and you do think they probably have associates kind of going through that, try to find the associate who focuses on the area that you're in. And I'd say for our firm, we're small. It's the partners who make the investment decisions. One day it'll be great to have an associate. But we love being reached out to by founders. And then also, if it's not within our area of interest, we're pretty transparent about that immediately. We're also open to connecting founders with other investors in our network who do invest in those areas. But I'd say definitely like finding the associate or the person on that team who's probably checking their LinkedIn regularly, who might be the first person that you would talk to anyway. And you can also always, I've used seeking advice pretty regularly, instead of, you know, invest in our company or whatever, or work for our company, whatever. I've used would love your advice. For reaching out to investors, ping an associate or something like that and say, I would love your advice. I submitted on your portal, want to increase my chances of getting on the phone with you or, you know, another notable firm like yours. If you're able to, you know, take 10 minutes to share some of your insights, I'll make sure to pay it forward or so, you know, like seeking advice normally goes a long way. So you don't always have to be as blunt as like, talk to me, I just submitted on your portal or whatever. And then definitely like if they don't have an online portal or whatever, just submit on through LinkedIn, like send a note and say, hey, I'd love to be considered by your firm, and ping anybody. Like you don't have to just find one person at a firm. You can always find like a few people and ping them all at the same time and say, hey, I've reached out to a few people on your team. Definitely if you've already reached out to one person and then a few days later you're reaching out to another, I'll normally say, hey, on Tuesday I pinged Brian at your firm, but you know, wanted to also reach out to you in case you see it first. And normally they'll go, oh, this person's really doing their research, or that's what I do. And again, some investors are just going to be hard to get in touch with, and some do follow the warm intro only situation. And I don't know what to tell you there, but I hope that those people change the way they do things. But normally there is someone at a firm that you can get in touch with. So even if it's not, you know, a partner or whatever, like associates are incredible and working their butts off and normally really excited to talk to founders. So maybe take that path.
Cool, thank you. I guess maybe a small follow-up then. Is there anyone specifically at Embedded Ventures that would be worth talking to about advanced manufacturing companies?
Any of us,
Anyone?
me, Jordan, hey, reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Or you can email. Our emails are out there. I'm JB at embedded.ventures and Jordan is Jordan at embedded.ventures.
Sure.
And we also have a portal online. We have a talent program and a founder network. So on our website, but ping us directly.
All right. Thank you.
We'd love to talk.
Thank you.
Very smooth, Aiden.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. Is there
It's
anyone say less?
Yeah. I have some questions that are maybe less about the general talk and more just about embedded ventures, if you don't mind me
Yeah,
kind
go
of
for
shifting
it.
gears a little bit. It's great to have you on this call and to talk to a venture firm that's actually investing in kind of deeper hardware style space technologies, specifically because VSG is currently developing a virtual space cohort, a national cohort. And, just I have so many questions about how to engage with space teams. But more than anything, I'm just wondering when it comes to investment, because as far as I'm understanding the space, a lot of investment in, DoD and Space Force and, these types of ventures come from grants and research, because these technologies aren't typically born out of, someone's garage. They are, part of, some sort of university or research institution. And so embedded ventures kind of serves as like something that's unique in the investment space. And I'm just wondering, how do you guys vet early stage teams who are still essentially finding, developing the lead time in developing hardware or even software has space applications is kind of long by comparison. They're not as agile. They can't, build an MVP and just start testing it in their market, right? There's so much that happens in that early stage that makes the team, need to be able to survive for a longer period of time. And so how do you guys vet those teams? Like, how do you make good decisions? What are you looking for in those early stage teams?
Yeah, so we invest in 3 areas and we're pretty firm on those areas. So, which they can sound kind of broad, but it's digital engineering, advanced manufacturing, and space operations. It all has to be, of course, beyond launch. Normally we like it to be something that we've never heard of. If it's something that we know about, then we're probably too late. And then we put founders through a very, very, very thorough diligence cycle. So thorough that we've been very respected because of it. But also when everyone, I think it was 2021-ish, when everyone was in the money machine, and founders could raise money like by doing like an intro call. And we were like, not us. Founders were kind of like, what? This is like ridiculous, all these calls. And I was like, well, if you want our money, you're gonna have to do it. Otherwise, bye. But we very much, first of all, to even make it to a phone call, I will say, is kind of hard because we track every company that exists in the space or broader deep tech ecosystem. Anything we hear about at our partner meetings every week, whether it's anything we would invest in or not, we talk about it. So we talk about what companies have popped up, who recently announced, what are they doing? Is that an area we're interested in? If it's not, why not? So normally, even with our inbound, we know pretty quickly if it's something that we would have a conversation with, if it's an idea that or founders that are worth, and it's also valuing both sides of our time. So it's valuing the founder's time and ours, knowing we don't want to waste a founder's time if it's just completely out of our thesis, or if it's an area that we're definitely not interested in investing in. We want to make sure that we're not like, leading anyone on. And so, but our very intro calls actually are with me and Jordan. So we take every first call. And again, a lot of that is because we're very particular with who we even do an intro call with. And again, that's just because we know a lot about our industries. But then it also, we're able to then also decide more quickly if it's worth doing a deeper dive. Sometimes if we were to pass it off to other people who maybe aren't as in tune with the space as we are, then it's a lot more, you can have more false starts, or you can have more conversations before the inevitable happens or something like that. So it's more so time, being efficient with all of our time. And then if someone does make it to diligence with us, it's normally after they've talked to our entire partnership, which is me, Jordan, Bill Cramsey, Mandy, and Vonnie. That's our core partnership. So that's 5 conversations just there. Normally with me and Jordan, there would be more than one before we conduct our full due diligence. And if we kick off due diligence, that's when we bring in, we create a deal team of 5 of our advisors. All of the advisors in our fund also get carry in our fund, which means they're very involved. They evaluate deals just like we would, because they will experience the upside just like we will if that company's successful. So we can trust them to do a deep dive. They're not just a name on a website. And we curate that deal team based off various areas. And normally it's technical assessment, product assessment, market fit assessment, character assessment, and team assessment. And so we'll assign one advisor, and we select the deal team out of our advisors based off who is the most uniquely qualified to vet on that area. We don't invest in areas we don't know, so we very rarely need to pull in someone outside of this group. And then we connect by then, we've given all of our advisors the rundown. Who is this company? What do we know about them? For information sharing, we use Loom a lot, and it just kind of prevents from having to have a meeting. I don't like for our advisors to get on a call with a founder and it be like Groundhog Day of like, how'd y'all meet each other? And like they don't need to know that. I don't want to waste anyone's time. Let's get right into the area that they need to dive into. So I'll use Loom videos ahead of time and send them to all the advisors and say, go through their pitch materials, talk and say, this is how we met them. This is what they're doing. These are the areas that we are still really questioned about. There are always going to be risks. And we like to know, are these risks ones that we can, and we are uniquely qualified to mitigate? And normally everything we invest in has risks going into it. But we only invest in companies that has risks that we're uniquely qualified to help them with. And so, yeah, our advisors dive into those areas. We then do a roundtable afterwards, going through all of their notes, all of everything. And then we'll do that whole thing all over again if we have to. Or at that point, potentially make a decision, but it is pretty thorough. We dive into a lot, and we write anyone who makes it to diligence with us, we write a full deal memo for, which is not normal for everyone else. If they make it to diligence, they're getting a full memo, whether we invest or not. So, and that's partially so that we make sure that we cross all our T's, dot all our I's when we're evaluating a company. But also, it gives us a ton of information. If we're going into diligence with a company, it's in an area that we're interested in enough to learn a lot about. And so it also is kind of houses all of that information so that even if we're a no, we can always refer back to that. So yeah, hope that answers your question.
Of course that answered my question. I mean, I honestly appreciate how thorough your response was. I really do feel like you walked me through that step by step, which is not, thorough. Yeah, it is pretty thorough. Do we have any more questions in the group? We are getting close to time. Otherwise, I will cap it off with, the cutesy end of a conversation question, which is, what advice do you have for these early stage teams in terms of making these connections? I mean, I know, especially in the tech world, these engineering founders are not the most social. They hate sales. They hate selling themselves. They feel like their work should speak for itself, especially because if they're founders, their work is like their baby and it represents them as a person. And it's almost like painful to become vulnerable in that way, right? And continue to put yourself out there. So is there any specific advice you have for that type of technical founder who's really just desperately trying to build out their network and find skill sets and connect with investors and just be more able?
I'll say, especially for engineers, put a process to it. I know engineers like little formulas and things like that, put a process to it. But the hardest part, even for me, and I'm someone who is somewhat of a social butterfly, the hardest part for me, because I get very anxious, keep in mind, I'm not an engineer connecting engineers. I get very intimidated. I have imposter syndrome out the wazoo. The hardest part for me and for anyone else, I think, is pressing the button to send the note, send the connection request, send the email. What you have is probably great. Okay, just hit the send button. So I'd say that's probably the greatest advice is just actually do it. You can talk about doing things for a lot of time, for forever. I talk about the gap between idea and action needs to be small in our industry to be successful. So I'm going to say, press the button, spend less time overthinking it, more time doing it. There's nothing that you can send that's going to be horrible. And like the worst case scenario is they don't reply. And that's not a big deal at all. Neil, to your point, I was just quickly reading this, establish strategic partnership, create your list. Say it's, say you want to know people at Unreal or wherever, create a list, find the right people who do strategic partnerships or whatever, or if they have, a venture arm or whatever it is, find that person, create your list and ping them. Same exact formula. My cold outreach is the same and my method is the same, whether it's a company, a founder, a potential mentor, a potential speaker for something, a potential whatever, it's always the same. So definitely create a list. And then connecting leading companies, and then also utilize USC. USC has a ton of resources of people, and there are a lot of USC graduates who have done really big things. And I will say, saying, hey, I'm at USC. I know you're a very notable alum, da, 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 da. I'd say in almost every industry, there is a notable USC alum that you can utilize. And so also definitely utilize them as well. But yeah, you're welcome. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us. We're going to go on a bit of a break for Oceanside Chat, but I did put in the chat our interest form for Summer Smasher. Any students who are interested in doing some project work and learning how to become an entrepreneur can join us this summer for our 8-week program. We also have a rolling admission currently for our space cohort that I mentioned. And, Jenna, I can't stress how much we appreciate this call. I know you're very busy and a very important person, and we hope to have you back for Oceanside Chats in the future. I love getting people to come back routinely, maybe a couple times a year, to talk about other areas. I know that this is just one facet of your very illustrious career, and so it'd be great to have you back. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. And y'all get in touch.
Thanks, Jenna.
Thanks, y'all. I'll also send you a list. I'll get Galen, to your point. I'll get my full list together of some resources for cold outreach. And if y'all ever need any examples, I have a ton of examples of what to send people, or if you need help, just send me a note and be like, is this okay? And I'll be like, yes, it looks good.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.
Bye, everyone.